It is exactly 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. The world outside your window has gone entirely quiet, save for the occasional, distant hum of a passing car cutting through the cool evening air. You are sitting completely alone in your living room. The only light illuminating the space comes from the cold, blue glow of your laptop screen and a single warm desk lamp casting long, silent shadows against the painted wall. You are comfortable here. You are at peace with the silence. Suddenly, a notification chimes. It is a sharp, sudden sound that briefly shatters the absolute quiet of your sanctuary. You slowly move your hand to your phone, swipe the screen, and glance at the alert. It is a memory notification from a social media platform, an algorithmic ghost pulling you exactly 10 years into the past. You click on it, and a photograph instantly fills your screen. It is a picture of you and your old college friends. There are 5 of you in total, squeezed tightly around a sticky, scratched wooden table in the back corner of a dimly lit, incredibly cheap dive bar, located just off the college campus. You look closely at the image. You are all holding up red plastic cups filled to the brim with watered-down, inexpensive beer. There is a half-eaten, greasy pepperoni pizza sitting in a cardboard box in the center of the table. You look at the faces in that photograph. Every single person is smiling with a genuine, carefree brightness. Every single person in that picture is entirely broke. None of you had a single dollar to your name. Your bank accounts were constantly hovering near zero, and your biggest financial worry was how to afford the next round of drinks. But you had each other. You were a tightly knit tribe, bonded by the shared, romanticized struggle of having absolutely nothing and the shared, intoxicating dream of one day having absolutely everything. But that was 10 long years ago. You slowly exit the photograph, open your phone application, and scroll down through your list of contacts. You look at those exact same names, the people who once knew every secret you held. You realize, with a sudden, heavy, sinking feeling echoing in the center of your chest, that you have not spoken a single word to any of them in many months. Some of them you have not seen in over 2 entire years. If a stranger were to look at their social media profiles today, they would naturally assume that your old friends have completely made it in life. They look incredibly successful, projecting an image of flawless prosperity to the digital world. Take your old friend Mike, for example. Just last week, Mike posted a massive album of photographs from a luxury vacation down in Miami. In the pictures, he was holding an expensive, brightly colored cocktail while lounging on the deck of a private yacht, wearing designer sunglasses and looking exactly like a man who owned the entire world. But because you understand the mechanics of money, you know the devastating truth behind those smiling photographs. You know that Mike paid for that entire weekend trip by completely maxing out his third credit card. You know that he is currently carrying tens of thousands of dollars in high-interest consumer debt, suffocating silently under a brutal 24% annual interest rate, just to maintain the fragile illusion of a wealthy lifestyle for people he barely even knows. Then there is Sarah. Yesterday, Sarah posted a highly edited video gripping the pristine leather steering wheel of a brand new, imported luxury sport utility vehicle. The comment section beneath her video is flooded with dozens of people, congratulating her on her hard work and her incredible success. But you know the underlying math. You know that she sat in a dealership and signed a brutal, uncompromising 72-month auto loan. You know that the shiny vehicle loses a massive, unrecoverable chunk of its financial value the exact second she drives its tires off the dealership lot, and you know that she will be heavily chained to that massive monthly payment for the next 6 years of her life, simply to impress other drivers while she sits miserably in morning commuter traffic. You look at these people, the ones who used to be your absolute best friends, and a profound, deeply unsettling question echoes in your mind. Why is it that the exact moment your bank account started to grow, you slowly became a complete stranger to the people you once loved? Society will always attempt to tell you a very simple, very toxic lie. The masses will tell you that money changed you. They will confidently say that the moment you got a little bit of wealth, the moment you began to understand the rules of the game, you became arrogant, cold, distant, and unforgivably greedy. They will accuse you of abandoning your roots and looking down upon the people who were there from the very beginning. But is that the actual truth? Or is the truth something far more terrifying and difficult to digest? The cruel, unvarnished reality is that you did not change into a bad person. You simply woke up. You finally started to understand how money actually works in the real world. You started to respect your future, your time, and your energy. And by doing so, you accidentally exposed a bitter, unspoken truth that no one wants to admit. Your friends are still playing the exact same childish, irresponsible games they played 10 years ago. The only difference is that their toys are now drastically more expensive, and they are using suffocating amounts of debt to purchase them. The separation between you and your friends did not happen overnight. There was no massive, cinematic argument in the pouring rain, no dramatic falling out where harsh words were screamed across a room. It happened much more insidiously. It happened slowly, quietly, through a relentless series of tiny, incredibly uncomfortable realizations. It started with the weekend invitations. Think back to the last time you all gathered together in the same physical space. Let us call it the housewarming party for Dave. Dave had just achieved what everyone in your circle enthusiastically calls the ultimate American dream. He purchased a massive, four-bedroom house out in the deep, sprawling suburbs. It featured a perfectly manicured green lawn, a spacious three-car garage, and shiny, untouched hardwood floors. Everyone from the old college group was in attendance, standing in the backyard holding expensive craft beers, patting Dave vigorously on the back, and telling him repeatedly how incredibly successful and stable he had become. Before your financial awakening, before you started reading books on cash flow and asset accumulation, you would have looked at Dave with pure, unadulterated jealousy. You would have looked at his massive kitchen island and wondered why you were falling so far behind in the race of life. You would have felt a deep sense of inadequacy. But on that specific Saturday night, you looked at Dave's house, and your newly trained brain processed something completely different. You no longer saw a castle. You saw a beautifully decorated, highly leveraged financial prison. Because you have spent the last 3 years deeply educating yourself on the fundamental differences between an asset and a liability, you could not help but see the invisible, terrifying numbers floating in the air above Dave's head. While everyone else saw success, you saw the 30-year fixed mortgage that would physically tie Dave to a corporate desk until he was 65 years old. You saw the crushing, inescapable property taxes that would increase every single year. You saw the monthly homeowners association fees, the massive utility bills required to heat and cool empty, unused rooms, and the inevitable, expensive maintenance costs of a rotting roof or a broken water heater. You realized a terrifying truth that Dave had not yet grasped. Dave did not own that house. The bank owned that house, and Dave had just cheerfully volunteered to be their most loyal, stressed out, highly dependent employee for the next 3 entire decades of his life. At one point during the evening, the group gathered around the outdoor fire pit and turned their collective attention to you. Dave took a sip of his beer, smirked confidently, and asked, "So, when are you going to stop throwing your hard-earned money away on rent and finally buy a real place like a grown-up? You cannot rent forever, you know." You paused. You took a slow sip of your water. You calmly explained that you strongly preferred to keep your capital fluid and accessible. You gently mentioned that you were actively channeling your extra money into investments that actually pay you a dividend every single month, rather than locking all your cash into a single, immovable structure that constantly drains your bank account through interest payments and taxes. You tried to explain, without sounding condescending, that you were focused on buying your total freedom first, and that a massive house could easily come later once your passive income could fully cover the mortgage without you having to work a single hour. The entire table went completely, awkwardly silent. They stared at you as if you had just aggressively insulted their deepest religious beliefs. In their eyes, you were no longer one of them. By choosing not to participate in their debt-fueled, culturally mandated race, you had indirectly questioned the validity of their most expensive life choices. To protect their own egos, they immediately labeled you. They whispered later that you were cheap, overly practical, unstable, and simply someone who does not know how to truly enjoy the fruits of life. The second major fracture in your social circle happened shortly after the housewarming party, this time at a loud, crowded local sports bar. It was a typical Friday night. The group had gathered to perform their favorite weekly ritual, complaining. For 2 solid hours, you sat in a sticky booth, nursing a single drink, listening to the exact same exhausted script you had heard for the last 5 consecutive years. They complained bitterly about their corporate bosses being demanding and unfair. They complained about the rapidly rising cost of groceries and the unfairness of inflation. They complained that their paychecks were miraculously evaporating into thin air before the month was even halfway over. They all universally agreed that if their company would just give them a tiny 5% or 10% raise next quarter, all of their financial anxiety would magically disappear forever. But you sat there knowing the brutal, mathematical truth. You knew that if they were magically handed a 10% raise the very next morning, they would immediately, without hesitation, increase their lifestyle spending by 15%. They would use the extra income to finance a slightly nicer car, buy more expensive branded clothing, eat at slightly nicer restaurants, and eventually find themselves right back at the exact same sticky table at the exact same sports bar next year, complaining about the exact same lack of money. Their entire psychological framework was locked into the endless, exhausting treadmill of earning money for the sole purpose of spending it. Work 40 hours, spend every dime, complain about having no money, and repeat the cycle until death. Eventually, you could not stay silent any longer. You gently leaned across the table and suggested a different approach. You said, "What if we stopped coming out to these expensive bars every single weekend? What if we took that couple of $100, pooled it together, or just individually invested it into a small side business or an index fund? What if we spent our weekends trying to build a system so we do not have to beg our managers for a tiny, highly taxed raise next year?" The response from the group was immediate, visceral, and highly defensive. They waved their hands in aggressive dismissal. "Life is way too short to sit around counting pennies and reading boring financial statements." One of them laughed loudly, taking a massive gulp of his premium drink. "You could literally step outside and get hit by a bus tomorrow. I am going to live my life today while I am still young enough to enjoy it." In that exact moment, sitting amidst the blinding neon signs and the deafening roar of the televisions in that crowded bar, you felt an overwhelming, crushing sense of isolation. You were speaking a completely foreign language. You were talking enthusiastically about buying back your time, your peace of mind, and your future autonomy. They were talking exclusively about buying more temporary, fleeting distractions to numb the pain of a reality they hated. The intellectual and financial gap between your minds had widened into an uncrossable ocean, and you realized, with a heavy heart, that there was absolutely no bridge left to cross it. As your self-discipline grew stronger, your bank account inevitably followed suit. Because you stopped buying useless things you did not genuinely need, and because you stopped desperately trying to impress people you did not even truly care about, your wealth began to quietly accumulate. And because you were quietly building real, tangible wealth, the dynamic of your remaining friendships took a dark, highly predictable, and deeply uncomfortable turn. It always begins with the text message. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when your phone vibrated on your desk. It was a message from one of your oldest friends from that college photograph. The message was unusually long, filled with desperate excuses, rambling explanations, and it ended with a heavy, dreaded request. They urgently needed to borrow $3,000. They claimed it was a life-or-death absolute emergency. They desperately explained that the credit card companies were calling them incessantly. Their rent was a week late, their car needed a massive repair, and they just needed a little bit of financial help from a good friend to get back on their feet. But you have a functional memory. Your brain automatically rewound the tape. You vividly remembered that just 2 weeks prior, this exact same friend had proudly posted a high-definition unboxing video of the newest, most expensive smartphone on the market. You vividly remembered seeing them out at a club wearing designer sneakers that cost significantly more than their entire weekly grocery budget. This scenario is the ultimate defining test of your new financial mindset. The old version of you, the insecure version that was desperate for social approval and terrified of conflict, would have transferred the $3,000 immediately, masking the weak behavior as an act of profound loyalty and deep friendship. But the new version of you understands the cold, hard, unforgiving logic of wealth preservation and risk management. You deeply realize that giving cash to someone who outright refuses to control their impulsive spending habits is not an act of kindness. It is an act of enabling their destruction. It is exactly like pouring your hard-earned, highly valuable water into a bucket that has a massive, gaping hole in the bottom. So, you made the absolute hardest choice a person can make. You typed out a reply, and you politely, firmly said, no. You did not abandon them entirely. You simply offered your time and your knowledge instead of your liquid cash. You offered to sit down with them at a coffee shop, open up a detailed spreadsheet, and help them restructure their disastrous budget. You offered to teach them how to negotiate their debt, how to cut their unnecessary expenses, and how to slowly dig themselves out of the terrible hole they had dug. Their reaction to your offer was explosive and immediate. They did not want a financial lesson. They wanted a consequence-free bailout. They immediately called you heartless, cold, and calculating. They weaponized the past against you, aggressively reminding you of the nostalgic days when you used to share cheap meals and sleep on each other's couches. They bitterly accused you of letting a few measly dollars destroy a 10-year friendship. They stormed out of your digital life, immediately painting you as the greedy villain in their victim-centered story to anyone in your mutual circle who would listen. You lost a friend that day, but in reality, you merely lost a liability masquerading as a friend. Then comes the final, most painful, and most psychologically revealing stage of losing your old social circle, the silent, suffocating presence of envy. Eventually, your quiet, lonely sacrifices begin to show undeniable, visible results. Maybe your passive income finally surpasses your living expenses, allowing you to quit the corporate job you always hated. Maybe you successfully purchase a piece of commercial real estate that generates positive cash flow every single month. Maybe you launch a business that finally takes off. You achieve a massive milestone that is genuinely, objectively worth celebrating. You naively expect your few remaining friends to be incredibly happy for you. After all, you have all struggled together in the trenches of poverty. Shouldn't they cheer the loudest when one of you finally figures out the maze and escapes? Instead, you are met with an awkward, heavy silence and a barrage of passive-aggressive remarks. When they hear the news about your financial success, they do not eagerly ask you how you did it. They do not humbly ask to borrow the books you read, nor do they ask to learn the specific strategies you applied to your life. Instead, they immediately begin to diminish your achievement in order to make their own lack of progress feel more acceptable. You start to hear the whispers echoing behind your back. "He just got incredibly lucky with the stock market," they say dismissively. "He must be doing something illegal or shady, because nobody makes that much money honestly in this economy." Or they use the classic ego-protecting excuse. "Well, I could have easily done that too, but I actually value my free time and my relationships more than I value chasing pieces of green paper." You cannot afford to be angry at them. If you truly understand human psychology, specifically the theories of Carl Jung regarding the shadow self, you know exactly why they are behaving this way. It is a desperate defense mechanism. For 10 long years, you were all on the exact same financial and social level. You were a very comfortable, highly validating alliance of people who were equally broke, equally undisciplined, and equally scared of the future. But the exact moment you decided to climb out of the bucket, you broke the unspoken social contract. Your intense financial discipline suddenly became a giant, blinding, inescapable mirror, reflecting their own laziness, their own lack of impulse control, and their own deep-seated fears. Every single time they look at your success, they are violently forced to realize a truth they have been avoiding. Their financial struggles are not the fault of the economy, or their manager, or the government, or bad luck. Their struggles are the direct, mathematical result of their own daily choices. That is a terrifying, ego-destroying reality for most people to face. So, rather than looking deeply in that mirror, taking accountability, and doing the hard work to change their habits, it is much easier for them to try and pull you back down into the bucket with them. This is the classic crab mentality. When a crab tries to climb out of a bucket, the other crabs will physically reach up and pull it back down to suffer with the group. When your friends realize they cannot pull you back down into financial mediocrity, they simply cut you off to stop the mirror from reflecting their failures. And so, the quiet thinning of the herd continues, week by week, month by month, until you find yourself exactly where you are right now. It is Saturday night. While you are sitting in your quiet, dimly lit living room, you open your social media applications one last time before bed. You see the brightly colored stories from the people who used to be your absolute best friends. They are at a loud, flashing, incredibly overcrowded nightclub downtown. They are ordering ridiculous bottles of liquor that cost an entire week's worth of wages, swiping their high-interest credit cards with a smile, screaming over the deafening, pounding music, and taking endless, repetitive videos to prove to total strangers on the internet that they are living an amazing, luxurious life. To the outside observer, they look like the absolute winners of life. To the outside observer, you are the tragic, pathetic loser sitting at home, abandoned, bored, and completely alone. But you know the math. You understand the brutal trade-off that is actively taking place. You are looking at a group of people who are willingly, happily selling the next 40 years of their precious lives just to buy 3 hours of fake, meaningless status tonight. They will wake up tomorrow morning with a pounding physical headache, a significantly lighter bank account, and a much heavier, darker burden of anxiety as Monday morning rapidly approaches. They are hopelessly trapped in a vicious cycle of working jobs they secretly despise, just to buy depreciating things they do not need, simply to impress people they secretly compete with. You look around your quiet room. You have a warm cup of black coffee resting on your desk. You have a notebook filled with brilliant ideas, a complex spreadsheet mapping out your investments for the next decade, and a clear, entirely unclouded mind. You have realized one of the most profound, unshakable truths of human existence. You cannot buy your ultimate freedom without paying a heavy price up front. And sometimes, The currency you must use to purchase your beautiful future is the temporary, biting loneliness of your present. You are not being left behind. You are simply changing your altitude. When you climb a massive mountain, the air naturally gets thinner and colder. The higher you ascend, the fewer people possess the lung capacity and the endurance to breathe at that elevation. The exact same rule applies to financial, spiritual, and mental growth. As your mindset elevates, you simply cannot continue to breathe the toxic, complaining, debt-fueled air of the valley below without suffocating yourself. Slowly but surely, as time passes, the universe begins to richly reward your painful discipline. Because you have ruthlessly emptied your life of the distracting noise and the toxic habits, you finally have the empty space required to attract a completely different caliber of person. You begin to meet a new circle of individuals. This new group does not care in the slightest what expensive brand of clothing you are wearing. They do not care what year your vehicle was manufactured, or if you even own a car at all. When you sit down to drink coffee with them, the conversation is entirely different. They talk passionately about ideas. They talk about acquiring income-producing assets, optimizing their taxes legally, and building automated systems that generate cash flow while they sleep. They discuss the books they have read, the painful mistakes they have made in business, and the lessons they have learned. They celebrate your financial wins with genuine enthusiasm because your success does not threaten their fragile egos. It inspires them to push harder. You realize the old psychological saying is absolutely true. You are the exact average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Your income, your mindset, your physical health, and your future will always faithfully mirror the 5 voices you allow to influence your daily decisions. By letting go of the old friends who were desperately holding you back, you did not suddenly become a cold, antisocial person. You simply upgraded your environment. You traded a comfortable circle of people who secretly wanted you to stay broke with them for an intimidating circle of people who demand that you continually grow. As the night finally draws to a close, you reach out and slowly close your laptop. You look at that old nostalgic photograph in your mind one final time. You visualize the 5 young, naive, hopeful faces staring back at you from the sticky table of that cheap college bar. You realize that you do not feel any anger toward them anymore. You do not feel any lingering bitterness, resentment, or sadness. You only feel a deep, overwhelming sense of peace and clairvoyance. Because you have finally accepted the cruelest, most liberating truth about money and human relationships. Society loves to endlessly repeat the tired cliché that money changes people and destroys great friendships, but that is a complete and utter lie. The brutal, undeniable truth is this: the vast majority of the relationships you formed in your younger, poorer years were never actually built on a deep, spiritual, or intellectual connection. They were not built on shared values, shared ambition, or a shared vision of a successful future. They were built entirely on proximity, shared misery, and shared financial incompetence. You were friends simply because you sat next to each other in the exact same boring university classes. You were friends because you worked at the exact same low-paying, soul-crushing retail jobs. You were friends because you all shared the exact same terrible habits. You drank the same cheap alcohol, complained endlessly about the exact same lack of money, and used the exact same lazy excuses to justify why you were not actively moving forward in life. You were deeply bonded by your mutual lack of discipline. And the exact moment you decided to break that comfortable habit, the moment you stopped complaining about the economy, stopped overspending on weekends, and started taking absolute, terrifying responsibility for your own financial future, the fragile glue that held that friendship together instantly dissolved. When you removed the complaining and the reckless spending from the equation, you looked around and realized there was absolutely nothing else holding you together. There was no solid foundation beneath the house. The friendship did not die because you got rich and arrogant. The friendship died because you simply outgrew the trauma bond of being poor. You must accept that you cannot carry everyone across the finish line of financial freedom. Some people are absolutely determined to stay exactly where they are in life, clinging desperately to their familiar struggles. If you try to drag them with you up the mountain, they will not thank you. They will only end up pulling you back down into the mud with them. So, the next time you find yourself sitting completely alone in your house on a Saturday night, the next time you slowly scroll through your phone and realize that the contacts you use to text every single day have slowly faded into total, heavy silence, do not panic. Do not let unwarranted guilt consume your thoughts. Do not let the loud, flashy, debt-ridden crowd make you feel like you are doing something fundamentally wrong with your life. You are not losing your friends. You are simply conducting a necessary audit of your life. You are liquidating high-maintenance, toxic relationships that drain your emotional and financial energy, so that you can invest absolutely everything you have into the greatest, most valuable asset you will ever possess on this earth, your absolute, undeniable freedom. Embrace the silence of the room. Embrace the empty space in your calendar. The journey to the very top of the mountain is supposed to be quiet. Let the masses have the noisy, expensive, heavily financed illusion of the weekend. You are quietly purchasing the rest of your life.